Welcome to episode 2 of our DIY deck build series. Previously, we battled the rock to get our precast footings in, and now we are thrilled to start getting some lumber in the air.
That's my helper over there.
Brace yourself because these first-time deck builders are about to get framing.
Seems really dangerous.
This is bigger than I thought it was. All right, you owe me ice cream if this fits. Odds you can catch this? We are currently standing where hopefully in the next couple weeks, we will have a fully waterproofed second story deck that our French door up there will walk out onto. In a couple past videos, we've covered the deck ledger, how that was all hung, bolted in, flashed, sealed, everything like that. The deck footings beneath us were also on a different video. And with those two things, we have the basic foundation of the deck where everything attaches to. This video is gonna be all about framing, raising our posts, installing beams and joists. And then we can get ready for waterproofing.
Let's get to it. Zach, call Zach. Alex, you're scraping the road really bad.
I'm constantly putting my little two-wheel drive 4-cylinder Nissan to the test, but it just keeps on going.
How did I lose that? I have no clue. Yeah, this chain is under tension. How that fell out right there, I have no freaking clue.
It's still moving the whole trailer.
I guess it'll get me up. Just broke my ratchet strap. Holy crap, that was miserably hot. Let's go over the overall plan for this first. There are a total of 7 footings in the ground. There's 3 in a row right here for our main beam. This is what holds up the majority of the deck. All of the joists will rest on this beam. These 2 over in the corner here are for basically a corner section of the deck. The deck is a 16-foot wide by 12-foot deep profile, but in the corner it's got a 4x4 foot extension because we have this stair set that comes up and meets the deck. So this platform is kind of a stair landing. These 2 columns support that landing, and then finally these last 2 footings are the mid-span of the stairs. That will keep the stairs stiff and keep them from bouncing because it is a pretty long run of stairs. We have our slab over there that the stairs will land on. So all of these deck footings are permacolumn precast columns with brackets included, but they are sized for pressure treated 6x6s, which are 5.5 by 5.5 inch columns. We got 10-foot tall ones, and they will extend up to really the top of where the beam is gonna go. But our deck footings are not perfectly at the same height. There are minor differences. Actually, this one is a few inches taller than the rest because we hit some really big rock there. So we have to compensate for that with the height of our posts. The first step is going to be getting those all cut precisely.
So is your side going in the bottom or mine?
Okay, lift.
Oh, you're gonna have to keep it from sliding out.
I got it. Lift, lift, lift.
Is it gonna fall in?
Nope, keep going. Yeah, it's sitting up about a 1/4 inch, oddly enough. I think it's because of the corners there. We're probably gonna want to round these corners off a little bit. Because, yeah, I don't want a 1/4 inch air gap underneath this.
No. I think that'll be good.
Now that's sitting flush. There was like a 1/4 inch gap here before because it couldn't fit in that radius right there.
This reminds me of framing the house.
Sure does.
I remember doing this. Framing's fun.
See lots of progress in a short amount of time.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was just thinking in my head. Did you get this one?
It's just got to be rough. It doesn't got to be crazy.
Okay, yeah, this is close. That made it a little bit tighter. Looks good.
Now we've got all of our posts temporarily braced. The next step is measuring them accurately. So I've got the Bosch rotary laser out. This thing has been amazing for everything from foundation through framing. And of course, we're using it yet again to do this job. This is gonna give us a nice level plane from this ledger all the way 12 feet out to these posts. I'm gonna hold the top of the grade rod at the top of my ledger here.
Hold on to it tight. I gotta go lower. I mean, it's a matter of
It's good.
the angle that it's at. Okay. We're right on the money. You hear that beeping? Straight line.
All right, now the top of my grade rod, if I take that to my post, I can just leave a mark there, and that is the top of my ledger. Now I gotta compensate for the whole width of the joist. I'll subtract that off where my top mark is, and then that is the top of my beam, and also the top of my columns. So then I'll cut those square off there, then I'll come down another 2x12 width, and that will be the bottom seat of my L, where the 2x12 will sit on. Actually, I'm a little bit short on this one, but I need to come down another 11 inches.
What do you mean you're short?
As in, the top of the rod is over top of the post. You know, I might need to do this from the bottom of the ledger instead.
Yeah, you don't want to be measuring in floating air.
I didn't want to do it from the bottom of the ledger because of the varying width of the joists. All right, I took some other measurements, and my ledger, since it's all dried out, is like 9 1/8 inches wide. My joists are like 9 1/2 because they're wet. So I don't really want to measure off the bottom of my ledger because those joists are probably gonna have to hang down a little bit below that actually. So I just offset 3 inches. I just needed to get a measurement that would fall on the post. So my 3-inch mark will be compensated for when we have to take out the 9 1/2 inches or whatever the joists are to get our final post height where we chop the whole top of the post off. All right, next one. Okay. A water level would have worked perfectly for this too. Have you ever heard of that?
No, what's that?
Tube, just literally a clear tube filled with water. And just by the principle of hydrostatic pressure, you can bring the tube up there, fill it up with water exactly where you want it at one end, and then on the other end, it's gonna be at the exact same height. Make sense?
But how does the tube, is it like this, like an L-shaped tube?
No, it's a big ass, it can be whatever, it comes all the way down to the ground, it can be 30 feet long. Just the fact that water always stays the same hydrostatic height, right? Mm-hmm. The pressure will, you know, balance out.
So you have 2 tubes?
1 tube.
So it's like a horizontal thing. I'm confused.
Just a long section of clear tube.
But is it horizontal or vertical?
I mean, both. It's a U shape.
Oh.
It can come down here to the ground. You can, you know.
Yeah, but it is 2 sides to it.
A tube has 2 ends, right?
Yeah.
Right.
But it has to be like this. Like it has to be U-shaped.
Yeah, the end, I mean, yeah, otherwise the water will all drain out.
Yeah, that's why I was confused. I didn't know if it was like a vertical tube that was plugged or something. Okay, got it.
The more you know.
I need to see a video.
What the heck? That broke.
Are you pulling it down?
Yeah.
Wait, why are we doing it this way?
What do you mean?
Why are you what? I thought you were gonna unscrew that.
I don't want to move the ladder if I don't have to. Support it there. Make sure the back doesn't slip out.
This seems really dangerous. You got it over there?
I'm working on it. Here's my -3-inch mark, which I just marked with the laser. Coming up 3 inches, this is where I wanted to mark originally, top of ledger. But this far column was just a little bit too low for that to actually land. This one barely landed by 1/4 of an inch. From the top of this mark then, I'm coming down the width of the joists, which I've measured a whole bunch of them. They've ranged between 9 3/8 to 9 5/8 because of all the different moisture contents. I'm gonna call that 9 1/2 for this measurement, and this is going to be the point at which I cut the whole column off. Once the column is cut to length, then I can take out what I need to support my double 2x12 beam. So there's the difference in my 3 different footing heights. This is the one that hit rock, so it had to be up way higher. This is like a 4-inch difference between this one and this one. This one's only about 1 inch, so those got pretty close. That's my helper over there. I've got my beam notch marked out here, and unfortunately my circular saw doesn't cut as deeply as the notch is. It's just about a 1/2 inch short, so I can't just do a bunch of cuts with the circular saw and clean it out with the chisel. That's how I'd prefer to do it. Instead, I'm just gonna follow the lines with the circular saw, cut along here on both sides, and then finish it out with the Sawzall like I did for the cross cut. I did the first one just to figure out what I was doing, and it turned out pretty good. So as long as you're careful, I think this will work out all right. There we go. Clean that out a little bit.
Ready?
Okay.
Whoa.
I got it. Keep lifting. Plumb that guy up.
That's good. But I don't know about the other way.
It's not even close the other way. I can see it from here.
Well, okay, there's a ladder in the way.
Just a little bit, just to hold it from slipping out.
Yeah, it's pretty much perfect on both ways. As a sanity check, Alex got his 4-foot Stabila plate level out.
This is more than 4 foot. It could maybe stand to go, I mean, we're plus minus an 1/8 inch, I would say. So I'm gonna call that good. I'm gonna check the other side, and this should be a successful beam install. Love this big extendable level. For situations like this, it's perfect. 6-footer would not do it. Oh yeah, we're pretty much dead on.
You gotta show them up close to prove it.
Maybe that right side could come up an 1/8, 1/4 inch, but not worth it. We're now ready to begin on our beam. So what we have here are two 2x12, 20-foot long. We do really only need about a 16-foot long piece, but we would have to pay close attention to how we have that position relative to our columns to make sure that the overhang's perfect and whatnot, whereas with the 20-footers, we're gonna put it up there with the ends long. We'll get our outside joist nice and square, and then we'll just cut these to exactly where they need to be. These boards have a little bit of crown in them. I'm gonna do my best to clamp them together before fastening so that they're nice and straight, and if we need to, we can run a planer across the top a couple times just to make sure that both boards are even and the joist will be bearing on both of them.
What kind of fasteners are you using?
All right, so to put this thing together, the main fastener, these guys right here, 3-inch by 131 galvanized ring shank nails. They're gonna be just about everywhere. And then to kind of suck it together before putting the nails in so that it's a nice tight beam, I'm using these 3-inch Simpson SDWS screws, very coarse thread. They actually replace lag bolts in many instances, but I'm gonna put these every so often, just sort of staggered, to sort of suck the beam together and then finish it off with a bunch of nails. Yep, flush that right up.
It's like not moving.
Yeah, I need to adjust with this one. Gotta have that leverage.
Yeah, because you can see this down here. It's like really offset. Precision engineering right here.
So we ran the screws in every 2 foot staggered, and I'm just gonna sort of infill with nails every 1 foot, and I'll do 3 nails across the width of it. We're pretty well fastened now, and we've lined one side up with the clamps, but because of just the inherent differences of lumber, the bottom side is not perfect. So I'm gonna go ahead and plane it so it's nice and flat. There's a couple spots in the top too where it wasn't dead on. So I'll plane both of them so we have a nice flat beam where it'll rest evenly on the columns and the joist will rest evenly on the tops. It's little steps like this, I feel, that make it a quality job and really help make everything line up better so that when it comes time to put the floor in, it's actually nice and flat and there's not weird inconsistencies.
This looks really steep. I'm scared. What am I doing?
Hold down.
Down?
Hold down and you walk, so you're levering it like a seesaw and then you walk it. Right. I'll do the same thing.
That is like very uneven. Your post is way too short.
Well, we got our beam up, but things are looking a little bit less than perfect on this gap. We've got about a 1/2 inch gap on one side, kind of teeter-totters in the middle. See how it's teeter-tottering? So we were not sure exactly which one was high, whether this one was too low or the middle was too high. But after some further investigation with a string line and the nice Stabila level, we have determined that this middle post is just a little bit too high, probably about a 1/4 inch. So we're gonna take a little bit off it and see if everything evens out. All right, second time is the charm. Took that 1/4 inch off the middle and now we are looking good.
Hard to catch it perfectly on camera, but we're sitting on all 3 posts nice and evenly.
Now ready to put some bolts through this. Got some clamps holding everything together, and I'm going to drill through for 1/2 inch bolts. I originally marked out centers about 2.5 inches from the edge of the beam, but I think I'm gonna offset them just a little bit because there's a little bit of twist in this beam. It's like this, and I wanna pull it flat. So I think I'm gonna come over about 3/4 inch just so that there's a little bit more than just the center axis being held to the deck beam. Top all bolted together, we can do the bottoms now. The permacolumns come with these 1/4 inch by 2 inch structural screws, and I guess it's 10 of them per column, 5 on each side. The bigger permacolumns have through bolts for like when you're doing a full post frame building, but I guess for these 6x6s, these little guys are what they recommend. It's what they have holes for anyway. I like using the screw to drill a little hole for the first half, especially near the bottom here because it's going to be the most prone to splitting here. All right, the main beam is done. It's looking good. Getting a little bit of a feel for how big this deck is gonna be. It's gonna be pretty freaking cool. And this is not even that big of a deck. Like a 12x16 is nothing crazy, but just seeing it come to life is like, whoa, this is bigger than I thought it was. We went ahead and stood up these next 2 columns too. They're just barely sitting there. I was going to use the laser to do the marking on this too and just make sure that it's good. And I was even thinking about maybe just going over with a level from the main beam, but I don't want the same situation to happen where once I put the actual joist across these, it's teeter-tottering on the middle or it's just not quite sitting right. So I think the best way to do this is to actually put at least 1 joist from where it's gonna sit on the house, resting on the main beam, and see where that ends up over on these guys. We just wanna get it right the first time, and the best way to do that is gonna actually be putting some lumber up there. Here is what I have going on here. I have this board screwed where it's just flush with the top of my ledger here. Just put some temporary toe screws in there. On the other side here, I made a mark on my joist where that ledger falls. But when I hold this guy totally level, you can see there's just about 3/16 of an inch there that the joist hangs a little bit lower. Some of that might be deflection of just it being cantilevered off the end of this beam. And some of it might be the fact that the beam is just a hair lower and the whole joist is sloping down a little bit. So I'm gonna cut it to where my level line is at. That way I can always shorten it if needed. I'll know if I need to do that if there is a gap between my joist and the main beam when we go to cut that. But you can always cut more off. It's a little bit harder to add it. So we'll take this joist off, mark where our level line is at, but this was a good sanity check just to know that it would not have been perfect if I would have just taken the level. I might need to trim it off again, but we'll see. So we got the columns marked up with the level lines and the 1 joist line just for reference, and now I'm gonna go cut those things. Our faithful friend Shane is on site again today to help us out on this beautiful Sunday afternoon. Him and Elena are gonna start with the beam that goes across these 2 little posts. So it's a 2x12x12. They're gonna grab that, cut it in half, and then laminate those 2 sides together just like we did for the big post up here. Oh.
Got it?
Yep. Okay, now you can move it. Yep, that's on. It's on the money right there. Now, the real question though is when we put this joist back up, how it sits. Let's flip it towards us. Hold on, 1, 2, 3. Here we go. We're gonna have to route out this PVC everywhere there's a joist, unfortunately. We didn't film, but we did do a test fit of this 16-footer, and we found that the crown of this board has a pretty big impact on whether or not it can sit on that. The first time we tried it, there was like a 3/8 of an inch gap. The second time we tried it, we flipped it over and the gap transferred to the middle beam. So that board is crowned and it's really hard to get it touching at 3 different spots. So probably the least important of the 3 contact areas is this one out here. These posts are here mainly to support the stairs in this direction. So we're gonna plane just about a 1/4 inch off where that joist will touch this, and we're gonna have to do that probably on these 6 or so. With the board crowned up like this, we might have been able just to get away with letting it float a little bit in the middle and let, you know, just time settle it back down flat. That may be the best idea. I've never built a deck before, so I feel like I would rather have everything be in bearing, even if that does mean there's a little bit of a permanent crown in the board. It's kind of hard to make these calls sometimes. Like, that's just the nature of framing and working with imperfect materials, is you got to deal with these little bits of imperfection that easily slow us up as DIYers. But if this were a professional deck framing crew or something like that, I'm sure they would have probably just let the gap be and moved on by now. So put it right to the edge. And even wet boards that don't appear to have a crown will eventually develop it as they dry. We're definitely going to want to make sure that the crown is up on all of them though. So while Shane and Elena were working on that joist, I went ahead and situated this beam, got those bolts up top fastened in, and got the screws down low done as well. So that's all nice and plumbed up, perfectly level, both across and to this beam here. And Shane and Elena got the planer out and took off just about 1/8 of an inch here. It's not much, but we did pull a string from end to end, and this board does have a pretty good crown to it. We checked another one too, and that one looks better. So I don't think we're gonna have this issue with all of them, but once all the joists are up, we'll have to go over with a straight edge and plane the tops of the crown out or anything, because we're kind of taking any of the movement that the board is able to make out by taking this little section off here so that it's fully supported on both posts and the ledger board. So we'll just need to make sure that all the joists are flat before we put the decking on. We're slowly losing our shade. The sun's gonna be on us any moment, so I had to switch to the regular sun hat. It's about to get pretty hot in here. As we were about to put this joist up, I realized we had a minor issue here, and that is the fact that when I cut this ledger, I cut it at 9¼ inches, which is the width of a fully dried 2x10, and we're putting fully wet 2x10s up that are like 9½ inches tall. So when we flush them up at the top, they actually hang below this board. I actually ripped this board out of a 2x12, and I should have just kept it a 2x12, but I didn't, and now I'm going to have to pay for that because our trim board is interfering with where our joists are coming in. They're coming about to this mark right here, about 1/2 inch down in the trim board. And so I'm gonna try to route out just a little recess in each spot where each joist has to land to try to make that work. The joist hangers sit off the face a little bit, so those aren't so bad, but the piece of wood itself is going to interfere. These are just the little problems that you just inevitably have to deal with on every project, unfortunately. All right, here's what we were able to get done with the router. It actually worked pretty well. Luckily, I didn't have to get into any of the screw holes that I put very, very close to all of the joists. So I think we'll be able to avoid those. And of course, some other modifications had to be made. For example, I thought that this joist hanger was going to be an issue because it was so close to this rod, and you can see I've carved it out, which is usually a no-no. However, this 1/2 inch rod is for the Simpson DTD2Z tension tie that I got to put on. And when I mock that bracket up, which is what I did when I hung this deck ledger, the reason this joist is here because that bracket ties right into it, and this is the exact offset. So Simpson didn't think that one through a whole lot with their standard joist hanger. They should have just made that bracket a little bit wider. But I think I'm gonna just drill one more hole into this hanger and call it good, but that's where it had to be. So I started relocating that joist. Of course, I carved this out to match that, and then I realized that. So this one's gonna be a little bit wider than the rest, but I don't think you're really gonna see it. Over here, there was some confusion too, because originally I was gonna do a 2x4 on the flat for a picture frame border, and of course, this was in the way of the joist hanger ear as well, and I didn't want to modify it too if I didn't have to. So I'm going to use a 2x6 instead. This is going to be my joist in here, and a 2x6 on the flat, just like that. At the end, we're using these Simpson concealed hangers so that they don't have flanges that overhang. And I pre-drilled and screwed all these in with their 1.5 inch screws. We did test fit this joist behind us. That 1/8 of an inch we planed off is perfect. It's pretty much sitting dead on both beams. So we're gonna go ahead and hang this one up, and then it's time for lunch. Try not to get impaled on this threaded rod sticking out of the wall. So we're tilting it towards you, right?
Yeah, top.
Okay. and we're in. So yeah, we won't fasten it on that end yet because we will want to shimmy it around to make sure that it's nice and perpendicular with the ledger. I will go ahead and screw this thing in. 6 more of those 1.5 inch screws and baby ain't going anywhere. So I fastened that first joist in, that is good to go, but it's not square yet. So I'm thinking what we do is do the second one all the way at the other end. That way we kind of have the outline of where we need to be. Square those up with some 3, 4, 5 triangles. And then we can fasten those in place and infill all the middle ones. Those will be the easiest. But once we get the outline squared, that's the most important thing. So you've got the right edge of the tape touching, right? Scoot it out just a hair. All right, I think that's gonna be it, 224.25. Yeah, that's pretty solid. 122.25 is what I'll call it. 175 7/8, all right. So that's the run. 122.25 rise. So the diagonal is 214 3/16. Okay, that's what we're looking for. Real world test, there's 12 feet of standoff on the Irwin. So 214 3/16. Oh my gosh, I fumbled the ball. All right, I got a screw, hold on, we're good. It'll be the squarest deck there ever was, gosh darn it. All right, it took some time to get those things square, but we finally did it. Shane and Elena are working on the second joist, or the third joist. My wife, Joist. So we made a mistake originally when we were trying to square up in assuming that the beam was completely parallel to the ledger. It's not. Just because of how the footings are, this one side is about 1 inch closer to the ledger than the other, just because it wasn't perfect. So we originally were squaring up using the beam as a reference to mark lines on and stuff, and that wasn't a good idea. We realized when doing our sanity check measurement, we measured from the inside of that joist to that joist at 195.5 inches. Well, we need to make sure that it's the same out here so that we have a perfect rectangle, and it was not even close. So we basically restarted. We marked out 12 foot on the actual joists themselves. We measured from the end of that joist to an arbitrary line on the ledger, and then calculated the hypotenuse that went between them. That got us this board nice and square to our ledger. Did the same thing on this joist here, and then sanity checked by measuring that 195.5 again, and they are perfectly square now. So that should be good when we go to put all the decking on. I feel like that was the hard part. Now we're going to go to town putting all the infill joists up in the middle. We're gonna start with those 16 footers. We might have to make some small modifications to make sure we have bearing on both beams. Then we'll be off to the races, especially once we get past the 5 or 6 16 footers and onto the 12s, because with the 12s only bearing on the ledger and the one beam, there's nothing that's gonna be wrong with those. We just gotta remember to crown them up. Shane's getting creative on keeping us cool on this 90-degree summer day, thanks to the pressure washer. Shane and Elena were doing some pressure washing of the boards earlier to get some of that lumberyard mold off. Once we get all our joists on and fastened, then I can trim these beams to the same width as the outside joist. This was the nice thing about running them long, is I did not have to be precise in positioning the beams. I just needed to get them generally longer than where the end joist was. For the ledger connection, we're using these 1.5 inch strong tie screws. It's just a lot easier than nails because I don't have a positive placement nailer. And then for the cross connections, I'm using 2.5 inch long. Again, you can use nails for this, but screws are way quicker and they're really not that much more expensive, honestly. And they're stronger. For the crosses, I like to pre-drill to get it started. Got to the very last 16-foot joist, and of course, all of them were actually perfect on the beams except for the last one. So Shane's gonna take another 1/8 or so inch off of that one so that we can get rid of the gap that was at the center beam. Tired. Tired? We can't give up till we get all the joists up. That's our goal. Come on, get in there. Can you hammer the end of it? Odds you can catch this? Yeah, it's moving. Keep it going. Quick toss.
Ready?
Yep.
Take two, you two.
Why does it have to be so complicated? My time, you took it
Well, last night we worked just past dark. We had to get the light out to get the last few joists up, but we did it. Big thanks to Shane for helping us do all that heavy lifting yesterday. That was the majority of the framing. Now it is just on to some smaller stuff. So got to get all these joists actually set in place. They are free floating on one end. They're fastened at the house end, but need to put some blocking in, get them all nice and straight and parallel, and then maybe we can get on to start stair framing here pretty soon. Before securing all the joists at the end there, I'm gonna put some mid-span blocking in here. Excuse those chickens, they're just going wild right now. At the 5 foot mark, because our span from ledger to beam is 10 feet. So at the 5 foot mark, I just snapped the chalk line all the way across. That will allow me to stagger the blocking on either side of it and nail it in. I went up to the ledger and measured the distance between every one of the joists, and the idea being if we keep those the same throughout, they'll be nice and parallel. Here they all are written down, and so I just cut a piece of blocking to every one of these lengths and labeled it. One thing to note is this is actually 2x8 blocking rather than 2x10, which is what the joists are. That is so that we have a space at the top for our waterproofing bladder. There'll be a lot more to come on that in a separate video. This is gonna be all framing, and we'll do a whole nother one on just the waterproofing system. That wasn't too bad at all. Started here on the right side, went about halfway, then came over to the left and met in the middle. I only had to cut about 1/4 inch off the last block. I just wanted to make sure that if there was any kind of stack up error, because you can never get these things perfectly tight, I wanted to make sure it was not all concentrated at one side, so kind of spread that little bit of error out, and there wasn't much at the end of the day. Used the framing nailer with our 3-inch galvanized nails for most of it, and where I could not get that in, used these 3-inch GRK deck screws. They drive really nicely. Great for the tight spots, especially with my right angle adapter. Now we got to fasten the ends of the joist to the beam. We'll be using Simpson H1 hurricane ties for that. There's those diamond metal shaped clips. We already slipped a couple of them on as we were putting the joist up. To save a little bit of money on the screws, I decided to go with the 1.5" 131 nails on these guys. So get my hammering workout in for the day, I'll use the screws in the tight spots where I can't get a nail. Well, that was a heck of a lot of hammering, but finally got it done. Would have gone much quicker with a positive placement nailer for metal connectors, but I have not made that investment yet. Definitely gave the old hammer a workout though. I did not put one on this guy right here, just because this is where the stairs mount, and I'm gonna double this up to carry the load of those stairs a little bit better. So the H1 bracket won't work with a double joist. I'm gonna cut that now, install it. I'll toenail that into the beam, and then I'm actually gonna solid block that from where this 12-foot section ends straight back through, just so that the stair platform is really rigid and sturdy. That's gonna be taking a lot of load. It's a pretty big stair set. So that's why I wanted to double this joist up to at least just in the portion between the beams where the stairs connect. Something else I noticed too while I was putting those hangers on was these last 2 joists were really kind of bananaed out. I'm not really sure why. I think this board might have just been bowed, and then I started adding my blocking and it just stayed bowed. So I took that second blocking out, unscrewed it, cut about 1/2 inch off of it, and then put it back in, and now that is nice and straight. So that shouldn't cause any issues with our picture frame border. I just had a thought. I think I might want to space this thing out a little bit because of my railing posts. They're going to need some blocking, both in this corner and this corner, because that's where our stair railing starts. So this plate represents the footprint of our railing, the bottom of the railing. And I need to make sure that in all areas I can either get a lag screw into something or a through bolt. So I either need to be landing this thing on an existing joist or a piece of blocking, probably a piece of doubled up blocking actually. The problem is though, is I'm going to be doing this waterproofing system, so I can't just place blocking willy-nilly because it's gonna get in the way of my membrane. So I'm thinking I actually might need to triple this joist up just to give myself a place to land for the other side of this plate. So I still have yet to plane this down, it's pretty uneven, but this is the idea here. Now we have something for a lag screw to go into for all of these joists. If I didn't have this waterproofing system, I probably would have just done a double here and then run a piece of flat blocking that I could do through bolts through. But with that water bladder that's got to be kind of sloped here, I don't have that option. Got some pretty big gaps in here. Nothing a little Simpson 5-inch screw can't handle. Fucked it right in. Remember how I used 20-foot boards for our beam? Now it is time to cut those things flush. So I already did the little guy. I just marked a plumb line down from the edge of that joist and cut through both sides, starting with the circular saw and finishing it off with the Sawzall. Now I gotta do the same thing for the big guys over here. I was waiting to put the very last fasteners in until I knew exactly where this is going to get cut off. The next task is cutting all of these guys to length here, but it's not just as simple as snapping a line and cutting it, because we have to think about where our deck boards are going to land, because we don't want like a little sliver of deck board at any of the ends. And we actually have 3 different spots where we have to think about: up against the house, at the end of the 12-foot section, and the end of that 16-foot section. So I've spent quite a bit of time just sitting and thinking about this and drawing some stuff out, and I think I finally got it. So first of all, I made a little jig. This is a 5 3/8 wide board. It's the same width as my actual deck boards, and this is a 3/16 spacer, which is the same as the gap between my deck boards. So when you add these together, that's 5 9/16 of width for one board and space pair. Elaine and I measured out from the ledger, so right there all the way out here to exactly 12 foot, and snapped a line. That's what this little blue line is representing. These 12-foot boards from the mill are actually over 12 foot. They're like 12 foot 1.5, which is going to turn out to be a good thing to have that little bit of extra length. But this blue line is sort of our reference. We're going to just see how the boards line up if we were to cut all these boards at 12 foot exactly. So here's how I drew everything out. You can't hardly see it because I wiped most of it away, but this is our blue snap chalk line. That's our 12-foot reference. It's actually 12 foot 1.5 from the flashing, because our ledger is 1.5 inches thick. So when you measure back to the house, you get 12 foot 1.5, and that's what's going to matter for our deck boards. If we cut at that blue line, we're still going to have to add our rim joist, which is this 1.5 inch space here. On top of that rim joist is going to be a 5/8 fascia that's just decorative. But what matters is actually the edge of our picture frame, which I want to overhang the rim joist by 1.5 inches. So we have about 1 inch here of actual overhang once the fascia is applied. That will soak up any unevenness in the fascia and give us a nice reveal around the whole perimeter. So that line is critical. And when I take my template and measure back from that, this is the edge of my picture frame, the inside edge. So it's kind of going to be straddling the edge of the deck here. Then I broke out my handy construction calculator, which allows me to do math in feet and inches. If I start with 12 foot 1.5 inches and divide that by 5 9/16, which is the width of one single board stack up, I get 26.15. So I can get 26 full board plus gap combos, and then 0.157 of a board gap combo, which is not good. That's gonna give me a little sliver of board. So if I start with my 12 foot 1.5 inches, but then I add 3 inches, my 1.5 inch rim plus my 1.5 inch overhang, that brings me to 12 foot 4.5 inches. How many of those boards can I get all the way back to the house? So I started marking them out, and then I was like, I'm silly, I should just use the math. 12 foot 1.5 inches, I'll do plus my 3 inches. Now I can divide this by my 5 inches, 9/16 board width, and I'm getting 26.696. So I'll get 26 full board gap combos and then 0.696 of another one, just to see how wide that is. 0.696 of 5 9/16 is 3 7/8. So not bad, but it's gonna be about half a board by the time I give myself some gap up against the flashing. Ideally, I'd like to maximize this to almost a full board. And like I said, these are a little bit over 12 foot. I have at least 1.25 inches more than that on all of these. So I'm gonna bump my measurement out 1 inch. Instead of 12 foot, I'm gonna cut it at 12 foot 1. That'll increase my gap at the house by another inch. So I'll be able to fit almost a full board, 4 7/8 instead of 3 7/8. Now I need to make sure that works going this way. So again, this is a 16 foot board. We have a little bit more than 16 foot. It's actually like 16 foot 2. If I measure out from the end of one of these boards, just arbitrarily, I have about 4 feet from my additional inch. So my blue line plus my inch. So really, I'm just trying to maximize the amount of boards that I can get in this space. I got 48 inches to play with. If I multiply my board width just by 2 a couple times, I get to 44.5. And when I line that up on where my new deck edge is, that's shifted another inch out, my tape measure is just about a 1/2 inch away, not even, from the end of the joist. I did a little sanity check with my jig and just put some marks on the board, and I can get 8 rows of boards in this space. So 44.5 will be not only the edge to edge of my deck boards, it's also going to be the edge to edge of my cut lines, which are going to be 3 inches offset backwards to accommodate for that 1.5 rim joist and that 1.5 overhang for my picture frame. So I'm going to cut 1 inch out from my blue line. I should have pretty much a whole board at the house, and I'll be able to do 8 boards on the other side of the line going out to the edge of the deck on the stair landing. It's really important to get this right now, because once we put our waterproofing bladders on, I'm not going to be able to really modify this all. Actually, once I even put the rim joist on, I'm not going to be able to modify this, and we need the rim joist before we can do the waterproofing. So if this were a traditional deck with maybe just some joist tape on it, no waterproofing, I probably wouldn't cut all these off until I actually have some deck boards laid down and I can easily see where they're going to end up. That would be easier than doing all this math, but with the waterproofing membrane, the math is the only choice. Luckily, the math never lies, unless you do it wrong, and then it lies, and that's happened to me plenty of times too. So we'll see where we end up. I already marked all the cut lines on the 16 footers, so I just need to draw a plumb line down from there. And on the 12 footers, I'll just come 1 inch to the outside from my blue line. It's going to be pretty darn close to the edge on most of them, and trim them with a plumb line there. Okay, your goal is just to keep it up as flat as you can against that board.
I got it.
You good? Let me get another couple nails in it so you don't have to hold it.
The board has is really high right here.
I'm gonna plane it down. Good. So we've got all the joists cut, the rim boards on, and as I was working up there, I noticed really that if I ever bumped the deck at all, it really shook quite a bit. I could just barely bump this thing and it would wobble the whole deck. I could hear that ladder rubbing against the end joist there. And if I just grab a hold of any of these joists with just a little shake, this whole thing kind of vibrates and shakes back and forth. So we need to brace this to make it sturdier. I've seen a couple ways that this is done. Most commonly, it's like an angle brace from the beam to the leg, but a way that I found online that I feel is probably better and more effective and less ugly is called V-bracing on the bottom side of the platform. I saw this on Dr. Deck's YouTube channel and I think it will work pretty well. The idea is it just keeps this whole frame from racking side to side by putting a triangular brace fastened up underneath of it. It's the same reason you put a sheathing panel on a stud wall so that the studs can't rack side to side and turn from a rectangular to a parallelogram. So we're gonna put some V-bracing with some 2x8s fastened to the bottom of this deck really securely, structural screws into every joist, and I'm curious to see how well it stiffens everything up. Step 1 here on the main platform was to mark the center of my ledger. That's where I want each of the V-braces to come in at. I'm gonna throw this blocking up just like that to sort of tie everything together here and give myself something sturdy to fasten that V-bracing to. Well, it's got these hangers. I'm just gonna get started with a tiny screw and then I'll put some structural guys in there. So I was planning on doing a second block here so that I could get the V totally symmetrical, but then I had second thoughts and I think just this one really solidly fastened block will be fine, and I'm going to just offset my center mark a little bit. The triangle won't be perfectly symmetrical, but it will definitely still get the job done. I just have to have this one piece of blocking in here and we'll sort of split this with the 2 pieces of 2x8 coming in. The tricky part is cutting a board to fit exactly between the wall and the beam with the right angles. We're gonna save ourselves the effort of trying to clamp it up there because we can't quite get it in the right position anyway because of the constraints of the wall and the beam. Instead, we're gonna do some math and see how well that works. Excuse my rough sketch on this piece of scrap, but here's our wall, here's our beam, and then here's the shape of the board we want. It's like a trapezoid. So we did take a measurement with the tape from long point to long point was 12 foot 9 inches, and then from our mark to the side of the joist was 94 inches. That told us this angle was 37.9 degrees using our rise and our diagonal,
And then working out with just basic geometry, we found this one is 52 degrees. So we're gonna cut this on a board, see how well it fits. How much would you be willing to bet that this fits?
$5.
$5? All right, you owe me ice cream if this fits. Is this gonna work well with this big speed square? I don't know.
55. You're at 56.
No, I'm looking at the intersection of the speed square angle and the board.
Yeah, but that's 50. That's more than 50.
Shit, you're right.
Alex, so how are you gonna know?
Yeah, this is my attempt at remembering how to use a speed square accurately. This is the line that I want. We're gonna, it's a pretty shallow angle, so if this does happen to be the wrong one, I haven't cut off too much of the usable board. We're gonna give it a shot. 38 degrees, which is the inverse of the 52 degrees that we want. I think this will work.
I'm not convinced.
We chickened out. We're just cutting the one side and test fitting, making sure this angle's right, and then just marking the other one. But I'm going to verify and see how close we were if we would have just trusted the math.
I mean, math
like
works.
any real framer would.
Math is trustworthy until you don't use it for a really long time, and then you don't remember if you got the equation right. This is heavy.
2x8. I've got my end where it needs to be.
Okay, I gotta push it towards you.
We're about a degree off, and Elena wants to fix it. So we're chickening out and doing the old scribe method to get that just right. Third time's the charm. Should be quite a bit lighter now, at least. There's 3 foot cut off the end of it. I mean, I'm where I need to be pretty much, but you need to go to the wall. All right, I'm clamped. We're clamped and we're ready for fastening. Here is my strategy for that. One of these 4-inch Simpson STWS screws in every joist, and then 2 3-inch galvanized nails on either side of it. So 4 nails and 1 screw per joist total. I could just use 2 of these per joist, but that would almost run me out of screws, and these things are expensive. So 1 screw and 4 nails it is per joist. Well, we repeated the process on the other side, and my gosh, does that make a huge difference. Like, it is way sturdier. I cannot physically shake this at all. We don't have any knee braces on the columns or anything. I don't think I want to put them on there because we're going to eventually be wrapping all this with metal and nice finish material, and that's going to be a pain to work around those. So I'm pretty impressed with that V-brace, and the only thing that still does shake is this very end part here. And I'm going to remedy that with just a single cross brace. I feel like a V-brace here, it's only gonna tie to 3 joists together and then another 3. So I'm gonna just go from one corner to the other, and that will sort of put a diagonal across all of them. And I guess if that doesn't work, I can always go the other way and make it like an X. But that should conclude all the structural bracing we need to do. Then we can get on to the top side of the deck, which is planing down all the high spots to make sure our deck boards sit nice and flat, and then putting our surface blocking in around for the picture frame. Yep. There's actually one last small thing we need to do on the underside of the deck before we move to the top side, and that's our tension ties. This is probably the #1 asked question we got whenever people saw our deck ledger. It was, what are those foot-long threaded rods sticking out of the deck ledger for? It's a code required feature on all new decks anyway. Probably a good idea to retrofit on any old ones that make sure there's a positive tension connection between joists of the deck and the inside of the house. There's 2 kind of main ways to do this. The first of which, which is probably easier, is brackets that go on the underside of 4 different deck joists along the span of the deck. And if you just so happen to be lucky enough that your deck is built at the same height, that the floor platform inside the house matches the deck outside, you can go right into your sill plate or the top plate of your first floor wall in the case of a 2nd-story deck. And that is all the tension tie you need. However, if the bottom of your deck joists do not coincide with the top of your first floor wall or your sill plate or whatever, you have to do something else, and that is where these Simpson DTT 2Z brackets come in rather than the 1Z, which goes into the top plate. These guys work with a 1/2-inch threaded rod, and that goes all the way inside the structure and anchors to our eye joists. We have a 14-inch deep floor platform, so these deck joists aren't even close to where the top plate is. It's probably down here. I went through all the pain of locating these deck joists relative to the eye joists when I did the deck ledger. I did the whole layout on the ledger. Now I get to enjoy the easy part, which is just putting the outside bracket on.
It just slides over the threaded rod just like that, and then gets fastened to the side of the joist with 8 of these pretty beefy structural screws. Of course, I can't fit my impact in here with this. Walkie adapter for the win again, as usual. Now just the bolt and nut slide on. It's easy as that. So we're finally topside on the deck, and it feels good to be up here for one, and it's nice and sturdy, but we have to make some minor adjustments to the tops of these joists. Lumber is never perfect, and this is certainly no exception. So I've got my 8-foot Stabila level here. I figure within 8 foot is all the longer we need to make them totally flat with. And then I have my Makita corded planer. I absolutely love this tool. I wish it was cordless, but I don't think it would have quite the same power if it was. I've never tried the cordless version of this, so I could be wrong, but really love this planer, and I'm going to try my best to take out any high spots. When we put the hangers up, I was pretty careful about measuring the width of each joist because they vary up to 3/8 of an inch, and we set the hanger right where we needed to so that all the tops were the same height as the ledger. But even still, there's crown to the boards. Some aren't crowned as much as others, so we need to even out those crowns and any other humps or variances with the rim board that are going to cause issues with decking laying nice and flat later. This 3-ply beam at the stairs was the first thing I took care of. These 2 plies were probably 3/8 of an inch taller than this one, and this is at the same height as all the rim boards and everything, so these 2 definitely had to come down, and after the planer was through with them, it's a nice even flat surface now. And this is especially important because the railing posts are going to be blocking into this, so we want to make sure it's a nice solid even surface. So planing was a pretty successful venture. I'm glad I took the time to do that because there definitely would have been some high spots where the 2 adjacent ones weren't as crowned. And actually one of them, I think the second joist here, I think we put this guy in upside down. Maybe we weren't paying attention to the crown and looking at something else. I don't know. But the whole one side had to get planed off. It was okay in the middle, and then the whole other side got planed off, and it was pretty substantial right up against this last joist. Probably almost a 1/4 inch in some places at the very ends off that outside joist. I just got done hitting all of the freshly planed edges with a little 1/8 inch roundover bit as well with my router. I really only did that because of the waterproofing membrane. I don't want a sharp edge where that rubber membrane is going to be sitting on top of for a long time. It might cause like a stress concentration there and eventually cause the rubber lining to wear through. So I want the nice round edges just like a board comes from the factory. The last thing we got to do before working on these stairs is our picture frame blocking. Elena has been so kind as to cut all of the end blocking that's going to go along here. We're using a 2x6 for that. I laid this end joist out so that a 2x6 fits right in there. We just have to cut it to length. And on this far end, that's a 3 3/4 inch gap. So unfortunately, I can't use a 2x4 there. I'd like to, but we'll have to rip that down out of a 2x6. While Elena's working on ripping that one board down, I'm going to start installing all the end blocking. I think I'm just going to use regular old 3-inch framing nails into the sides for that. I'll start going every other so we can get nails in from both sides, and then I'll have to toenail everything else, and I can also be nailing in from the edge of the rim board. There's a couple select spots like there, where we're going to have railing posts that are surface mounted, and they're going to be drilled and through bolted or lag bolted depending on where it lands. If it lands on the rim joist, down into the deck frame to keep those railing posts nice and sturdy. So we're going to be doing double layers of blocking in those areas. We'll probably just cut an extra piece a couple feet long and then use our Simpson lags to run those through the side and get that blocking super secure there, so when we through bolt them, that post has something really solid to attach to.
That burned through a battery.
So I got up here to start putting this end blocking in, and then I realized after putting one piece in, wait a second, do I actually need this? And I think I concluded that I don't. I can get by with just fine with just the rim joist and the actual joist, just like all the rest of the deck boards have. So the only place I actually do need it is this one piece that I put in
where we're going to have a railing post, which is pretty much centered right here in this little span. I put a double piece in there because it's gonna be like through bolts going through that, and I want it to be really solid. So I put 2 blocks thick in there, but other than that, I don't really want it because I'm gonna have that waterproof bladder in here, and any flat spots are just more places that water can accumulate on top of the waterproofing system and not drain down where it's supposed to. So the pieces of lana cut are not going to waste, however, because we are using it at the edges. I just got done putting in this long piece, and I have 3 pieces of blocking on the underside of that where each railing section is gonna go. These little top pieces are nice because they keep it from falling through as we're trying to wiggle it in here. V-braces are nice for walking on too. Now for the tedious process of carefully making it flush and putting some screws in, put some nails in, and then I'll use Simpson screws at the blocking areas, a couple of those 3-inch lags, or maybe 4 inches actually, in through the sides to make sure that that secondary blocking is really secure for that handrail. Bro, come back up. GoPro, stop recording.
I was gonna put stair framing in this video too, but we're already at time for today, so catch that on the next one. If you made it this far and you're one of the 85% who aren't subscribed yet, you might as well just give that button a gentle tap. As always, thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.